let's jump straight in. What is the best way that we can regulate ourselves so that we can be more in control of our reactions to our children?
Regulating ourselves when our kids are pushing our buttons, that is so not easy, because our kids are like experts. They are just experts, and they kind of push every button on our control panel, but they just know how to do it. You think it's just like some weird, just expertise they have. And it's just not easy to do. There are a number of ways to help kids and help ourselves when they're doing that. And one of the first things is to understand that they don't mean it. They don't wake up in the morning thinking, I wonder how I can really upset my mother today. Let me choose from this selection. Right? You'd swear they do, right? But they don't. They don't do it. One of the things that's a bunch of parents says really helpful is that when our kids do that kind of stuff, is to understand they're like echolocating us, they're like pinning us. One of the things, like I've been a school counselor for years and years, family counselor, but I just don't believe in disobedience. I've never met a disobedient kid in my life. I've only ever met an oriented one. And I don't mean that just semantics and nice way of seeing it. Like, I've met some right little rotters, I can tell you, goodness. But they're disoriented. When they're behaving badly like that, they're actually trying to get themselves together. They're like pinging us like navigators do at sea. They send out this sound, and it bounces on something and comes back. And what our kids are doing is sending out behavior. Because I don't know, have you seen little kids when they do stuff that's really naughty and they look right at you? Have you ever? Yeah, they do it, and then they look at you and say, "So what are you going to do about that?" It's and to understand that they're doing it to find themselves. They're doing it because behavior, all it is it's communication.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
need
behavior
connection.
is. Yeah, exactly. That they need connection. And if we know our kids are pinging us, they're echolocating via us, it's just knowing that. I know it sounds like nothing much, and it might sound sort of philosophical, but just knowing that they're doing that, it's really hard to take it personally. If a child really messes you around, and you look at him or her or them and just think, I wonder why you're so lost. I don't say that out loud. They'll think you're weird, but I'm lost because you're weird, Mum. But if we can look at them and wonder that inside ourselves, it's just super hard to take it personally. It's not about me anymore, right? And that if we don't take it personally, our kids do something called co-regulating. And co-regulating, it's a really wonderful and amazing thing to understand when kids co-regulate. Maybe if I can give an image, a metaphor about co-regulation, because if we get ourselves together, then our kids do too. And the metaphor, I was working with a guy years ago called Joseph Chilton Pearce. He wrote a book about transcendent biology, really, really interesting book. And one of the things he said was that if you take a cell out of a heart, and which you can do apparently, and put it in a solution, look at it under a microscope, the cell will beat, and it will keep beating actually in the same way the heart beats. Now then, after a while it'll fade and then expire. But if you when it's fibrillating, when it's not doing well, if you take a cell from another heart, a completely different heart, and put it beside the fibrillating cell, the one that is fibrillating, that is dying, will recover, and the two will start beating in unison.
Wow.
The two will start.
What a love story.
What a love story. A self-love story, right? But that's what our kids need when they've lost it. When they've lost it, they're emotionally fibrillating. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can just see it. If we can hold it together-ish, don't have to be spectacular at this. We don't sort of have to be sort of Yoda-like. If we can just hold it together a little bit, then they will start co-regulating. So that's why I appreciate your question, because it's not about them. It's honestly, when our kids are messing us around, it's not about them. Yeah. It's not about me. It's about us. It's about the space between us.
Right.
And that's why I wrote this, being at your best. This you're referring to, being at your best when kids are at their worst. because when they're not doing so well, they're so needing to rely on us not screaming, not
Yeah.
shouting. Because do you know that feeling when you scream and shout at a kid, and or you just you just lose it a little bit even? It's, do you ever have that feeling that you can, like, you can actually hear yourself doing it?
You can
And
feel it in your body before it even happens.
okay, so there you go, and you can hear yourself doing it, and you can see yourself doing it, and you can't stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking, man, this is so not attractive.
Mm-hmm.
This is,
Yeah.
I'm going to regret this later. But Jade, one of the things you mentioned just now, to another point to answer your question, is a lot of the parents I work with, we work really hard to understand where our body clenches are, because your body will tell you ahead of your emotions. The
Mm-hmm.
body usually gives you about 3 or so seconds lead time before something really unfortunate happens. And so some parents say, I feel it in my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Others, it's different places for different people. But for example, for me, I played a lot of football, and so we got taught to brace for impact. So we would really lock out our knees and brace for impact. And so when I'm starting to lose it, I actually feel it. I lock out my knees. When you guys are about to do it, where do you feel it? Say,
Well, Mercedes has a partner, so she can maybe relate it there. Yeah, I
Thank you.
noticed for me, I noticed that my heart rate is just elevated. And so in any conversation, if I can get my heart rate down, then I typically don't regret what happened. But if I react when my heart rate is elevated, it's never what I would like it to be.
Right. And you can, but and it's interesting that you can sense it. You sense it. You sense it.
Mm-hmm.
One mum described it to me as, she used a term, the red mists rising. I'd never heard that term before. I'd never heard it, but as soon as she mentioned it, I knew exactly what she meant.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you get a place where you go to Mercedes shoulders or something like that when you're starting to get mad and you
Yeah,
know?
it's the back of my neck and, trap area, or it's kind of the heat in the pit of my stomach.
Mm-hmm. And I think it all goes to like slowing down, because all of those things you do in that moment, they're a shortcut. Yelling, spanking, it's all a shortcut and a convenience thing. And you're choosing like long-term suffering. You're choosing short-term suffering over
short-term
what I mean?
futures and short-term.
Yeah.
No, what is the saying?
But if you're doing what Kim is saying, yeah, you know what I mean. If you're doing what Kim is saying, then you're choosing the connection, which isn't convenient and it takes longer, but it's easier in the long run because you have children that are able to connect with you.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at anger is,
Mm-hmm.
it's just an emotional attempt to address an emotional imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we're feeling small, we make ourselves angry in order to get our shape back.
Yeah, like
Because when
yelling when
you're
you don't feel
angry,
heard.
yeah, like yelling, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like yelling when you don't feel heard. Couldn't put it
Mm-hmm.
better. And so in order to sort of understand, well, first of all, to understand that I'm yelling because I don't feel heard is a really big one. I can't tell you how many mums and dads over the years have said to me when I've asked, like, what is it? What's the trigger point for you? When people around you, partners, kids, work people, colleagues, and many of them say it's feeling unheard. It's unseen. I worked for a while in Southern Africa, and they had this great greeting there. You hear it all around the marketplaces. You hear people say Subanu, Subanu, and they're calling it out. It's so joyous, and it means I see you.
I love that.
But then the response, this is so great. The response to it is Ngohona. And Ngohona means, so now I am here. So the greeting, and you hear it all the time, Subanu, brother, Subanu, sister, and then Ngohona, oh, thank you, now I am here.
Yeah.
You can't be here unless you're seen, right?
Yeah, that validation of existence.
Yeah, which is so interesting, because you saying, I don't feel heard, it's completely different than saying, well, I'm yelling because they're not listening. You're making it about your children. Whereas when you say, I don't feel heard, you're making it about yourself. And if you can heal that, then in turn, you're going to make your children feel seen and heard as
Well,
well.
well, the only thing you can control is yourself.
I know, yeah.
I mean, that's the good news and the bad news all in one go.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. Because yelling at your kids thinking I'm going to control their behavior is, I don't know, it's like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. It just doesn't. One of the things that I often think of is that poison and toxicity just erodes the vessel that holds it. Bad thoughts, toxic thoughts. It's only hurting oneself.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's all there is to it. And, and that's okay. We sort of can get this sort of stuff, but our kids really, how can we put it, that what would be the euphemism, that it's a big personal development moment,
Yeah.
because they test us out. And so in that way, when our kids are really messing us around, if we know they're lost, right, and they're just trying to find themselves, then a couple of things happen. One I've already mentioned is that there's not a big chance that we'll take it personally, because it literally takes us into a different part of our brain. If we're inquisitive rather than accusative, right, then that lifts us out of the fight or flight brain and brings us right into the mid and front, the limbic and the frontal lobes. So just the very act of training yourself to pause and wonder, give yourself a couple of seconds, notice your body clench, the body clench, wherever the clench is, notice it, train yourself to wonder, I wonder what's going on for my kid. Even if you force yourself through gritted teeth to ask that question, I wonder what's going on for this bloody little kid, even that, you're really elevated, but you forced yourself to stop and ask, or partners are included, Mercedes. I wonder what's going on for this person. That in itself it brings you away from the amygdala, from the fight, flight, and I always had freeze or flock. Yeah, flocking is the gang thing. Flocking is when people start to recruit each other. It's when brothers and sisters will start trying to get people on their side, or partners, workmates will start recruiting others. That's the flocking instinct, but it's still really primitive. It seems like it's not, but gossiping, when you gossip about a workmate, that's just the amygdala. That's the primitive. That's the monkey brain. That's the lizard brain. Actually, it's more ancient. It's the lizard brain, because it's just a dressed up flocking mechanism, fight, flight, freeze, or flock. And the thing that I really like about understanding that your kid has lost it and they're trying to find themselves is that you don't have to come up with some spectacular answer.
Right.
You don't. The answer, it's okay. You might think, oh, okay, my kid is low blood sugar. Oh, I knew we shouldn't have done that extra play date. Oh man, I just knew that. But whatever it is, you might come up with it. But actually, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you've changed it's almost like the emotional chemistry. You've just gone ahead and changed it. Yeah. So that was it. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, if you think we're the most important people in their lives, and you think about if you're with your partner and you're having an inner meltdown and you're feeling lost, would you want them to yell at you? Would you want them to and they're so much bigger than you, like we are to our kids in a way, they're so important. And if you think, well, I just want them to ask me what's really wrong and then to be there for me. So I think if we can also think of our kids as we're really we're their world, the way that sometimes our partner is and how we would want our partner to respond to us.
And to hold a general sense of respect, whether I think it's for your child or for your partner.
So it all comes down to compassion. Yeah.
Well, one of this compassion piece is huge, because compassion doesn't always need to be soft and gentle. Compassion being very direct and really or anything in between. But one of the things that I write about a lot, and I discovered this practical compassion, this I call it the compassionate response practice. I was a long time ago, I was working in court-ordered counseling for domestic abusing husbands. And these guys had been through cognitive behavioral therapy, every anger management therapy you could imagine. They were right on the edge of custodial sentences. And these were really good guys. They were nice guys. And they were, when it all came down to it, they were deeply ashamed at their behavior. Once you sort of lay it on down through it, they truly were. These were just regular working guys. And I came to really, we had good conversations. But I realized really quickly that all that stuff wasn't going to work. Now, at the time, I had the big advantage. You can hear I'm not from the United States, right?
Yeah.
One or two words. So I grew up in Australia, and in Australia, sports is kind of obsessional. We're really into sports in a big way. And I was a youth elite athlete. I represented, my country, and which sounds kind of great, but it sort of wasn't for a kid and a teenager to go through that, because we got wicked overtrained, and part of it was tough, but part of it was really great. And the reason I'm saying all this is that we got access to sports psychologists. Now, as a kid, I had no idea that even something like that even existed, but these sports psychologists taught us visualization, the power of it. It was amazing, because I was I could train really well. I could do really well. But when I got in front of thousands and thousands of screaming people, my performance really dropped. Always did. It was okay enough to stay in the team, but it wasn't full potential performance. Now, these people taught me to visualize, and they taught me to visualize myself playing really, really well. They taught me and I said to them, but that's stupid because I'm not playing well. They said, doesn't matter, just do it. Just visualize yourself playing really well. And every time before you walk out onto the pitch, every time you just visualize yourself doing super well. So anyway, I did. But I also came to realize that I feared not doing well. There was a fear in me that I wouldn't, because this is in front of tens of thousands of people, right? And you just feel like it's like you're just letting everyone down. And so I started also, this is as a kid, it's a kind of interesting thing to do as a kid, but I started visualizing myself not doing well. And that was because I grew up a Presbyterian. We're heavily into sort of stuff. Life is hard and all that. Anyway, and so I started visualizing the two things, myself doing really well and got a good grip on that. And then started visualizing and allowing the visualization, the picture of myself feeling terrible, to be honest, I'd feel a little bit ashamed because I'd let my kids down. So I started working with that. And it was amazing how my sports performance increased. Now, working with these dads, I could see that they were really ashamed. They weren't playing in front of thousands of people, but they were doing this in front of their kids. Their extended family knew about it. People knew. And these guys are now, in court because of it. So I said to them, hey, look, let's not do any more anger management. They were really happy about that. I said, I described to them a little bit about my sports biography like I did. And I said, let's do this. You guys are really brilliant dads. And some of them, these are tough guys, right? Would just tear right up at hearing. I said, no one said that to me in years. And I said, wow, you get on perfectly well with your kids a lot of the time. You would take a bullet for them. You just totally. And they said, yes, which is why we get so upset when they're so. I said, exactly. So let's take a moment and realize how brilliant you are. It's totally brilliant. How you have fun, how you care for your kids, and you love them deeply. So we would create a real living picture of that. And then I'd say, okay, now let's picture yourself doing really badly. One dad called it his inner jerk. and that was easy because they'd been there a lot and they'd been told how bad they were about so many people, because they genuinely were. That was terrible things they'd done. So we would picture that. And one of the things that was really interesting was that they could really quickly go to the bad guy stuff, but it was kind of hard for them to go to the good guy stuff. Not easy. Now, as parents, this is not just guys like this, that's us all. We have such high standards for ourselves. Man, we have high standards. And this thought of, am I really screwing my kid up? Am I manage here? Am I doing something wrong? And it's where it's full of self-doubt. Like parenting is just the path of vulnerability.
Yeah, honestly, it really is.
You just can't be more vulnerable. I guess being a partner is right up there and very vulnerable in that.
But there's no way out in parenting.
There's no way out. Yeah, there's no way out, right? You got it. It's just you and them. So I started working with these guys, and their behavior started to shift for the first time. Because remember, these guys were on the edge of a custodial sentence, and they started improving. And they started getting it together. And then I realized something really important was that the bad guy stuff, the bad parent stuff was taking up way too much space. The good was out of whack, right? The good parent was this tiny little thing and the bad guy was huge. So that when their kids would do stuff, and they'd get triggered really easily because they couldn't remember their goodness. So what we started doing was this power of this visualization that I learned in sports. It's interesting. A lot of stuff you learn in sports applies to life. I guess that's why we do it.
Yeah.
But I started teaching them to actually, and myself too, to like reach out to this bad guy stuff, to the bad parent, reach out to it and treat it like a fever. Because I'd ask these guys, when your kid's got a fever, what do you do? And they say, well, we hold them real close. And I say, okay, but you have a fever too. You have a fever. So hold yourself real close, like forgive yourself, like reach out to all that stuff, which they were trying to push away. Now, this is the key thing. They were trying to push this stuff away. I don't like that side of myself. And it was a bit weird suggesting they reach out to it and draw it in.
Yeah.
That's what you do with a child. You draw them in. So you draw yourself in, reach out with that visualization and own it. Own it. Own the fact that you can be a really scary dad or a parent doing so well. Bring that in and just forgive yourself. That's back to the compassion you mentioned. Just having self-compassion, because we can have compassion for others. Like if someone in your family is really sick, a really close friend, a dear pet, an animal in your family that has been there for years, a lot of compassion. But we don't often have compassion for ourselves. And so reach out, and this is what we can do for ourselves as parents. Any parent is create a visualization of ourselves when we're not doing so well. And this may sound counterintuitive, but then just accept it. Accept it. Then step number 2, there's only 2 steps. Step number 2 is to remember how great we are and give that more space. And just breathe it out, let it out, just grow and glow and be fantastic, be spectacular, and just do it quietly yourself and just practice breathing in the bad parent, the shameful parent, the I'm not good enough parent. You can imagine what it's like for me. I write books on parenting. So every time I mess up, I think, man, I write books on this stuff and I just messed up.
Yeah.
And so for me, I feel like an imposter, right? So you just reach right out and just get a hold of that thing, because it's going to control us if we let it out there. Whatever weight we hold away from us gets heavier.
Yeah.
If we pull that weight in, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. Make it smaller. Say, you know what? I forgive myself. That is me. I'm not perfect. I forgive it. And then remember, breathe out this great self. Now, the reason I'm suggesting this is that when we're with our kids, if we practice that, like in the morning before our feet hit the floor, just one breath in of, okay, here we go, another day. And particularly right now where we're with our kids a lot, it's like going in kind of feeling, right? Okay, so you draw that right on in, and that kind of hesitancy or whatever it is, and then you let out, and you know what, I'm a really good mum. I'm a pretty good dad. I remember times when I was pretty on my game. If we do that and we practice it only takes 30 seconds, a couple of times a day, 30 seconds, practice that. Here's the thing, is that when our kids push our buttons, then it becomes like an emotional muscle memory. Then they push our button and we feel that red mist rising, and we feel that anger, frustration, shame, imposter, whatever it is. If we've practiced this enough, just like a musician will practice for a concert, just like an athlete will practice for a game, somehow in parenting, we think we can just wing it.
Yeah.
And we can't.
That's true.
I'm suggesting that we practice it, and it's really, really quick little practice, and then bring that on in, and then release on out this feeling of, you know what, I'm a good enough mum. I'm a good enough dad. I'm doing all right here. Now, and then, and only then, do we speak to our kid. Now, when we speak to our kid from that sort of space, that we're balanced, and we discover our voice, not some weird stress regress voice. Some voice, one of my closest working colleagues, she often says, if it's hysterical, it's historical.
Oh, that's good.
And she says it actually, do you know the singer-songwriter Jewel?
Yeah.
Jewel? We work a lot together. We're about to do a TV series together.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
And that kind of, she says some great stuff. And that hysterical, it's historical. It's
I love that.
Yeah, right. She writes about that also in her Never Broken as well. But because she's had a biography, she's had a pretty tough life.
I've read it.
Have you? It's strong stuff, isn't it? Yeah. And so when we speak to our kids, if we just bring in the darkness, let out the light,
right,
then what our kids hear is us, not some weird triggered voice from our biography. Kids, they want to hear our voice. They really, really do. And when they're not doing so well and they hear us being centered like that, full circle back to the two beating hearts.
Yes.
That's they've lost it. They're saying you're the worst mum ever, or you're the worst partner ever. You know, like whatever it is, they're saying some pretty unkind stuff, and we've managed to hold it together. They'll know it, and they can start to regulate. But this is that it doesn't mean we have to be kind and calm, and we might turn to a kid and say, "Hey, Max," they're often called Max, names. Anyway, we might turn right to them and say, "Hey, you may not talk to your sister like that. You're a helpful little boy, or you're a helpful girl. You're a helpful kid. And what you just did was, man, that was unhelpful. That was so unhelpful. Something must be bugging you to behave like that. Just cut it." You might get that voice, or you might just have, "You know what, come over here, love. You just need a cuddle." You just do. But whatever you do is real. It's not fake.
Right.
Because, you know, when you're trying to, with anyone, you've got this thing going on inside you, and then outside you're staying calm.
Right.
Kids know it.
Yeah. That foundational work is really important. I think we address that a lot on the show, usually in, in adult relationships we use a Jungian term, shadow work, making sure you do this work on your shadows and your darkness so that when you go out into the world, you can be the best light, the light you want to be. And I think that is foundational. And that practice that you gave us there is something that anyone can practice, whether you have children or not. But I could see how that would put you in the right state of mind to go interact with your kids for sure. And so I wanted to ask you about screen time, because something that is so different from when Jade and I grew up was, we didn't have this easy and readily accessible screen time. We were more than likely out playing. Maybe we had a VHS we popped in I don't know if we're aging ourselves now, but can you talk to us about how screen time might be affecting our kids today and how it may actually affect their future as well?
Yeah, no, it's a big question. It's on a lot of parents' minds. It's on you see, for me, I'm not so much just anti-screen, because being anti anything is not so helpful. But because screens are great, in terms of, well, look at us right now. We're communicating through a screen. But through technology, we'll put this message out into the world through technology. It's a brilliant tool, but man, it's a powerful tool. It's a really, really powerful tool. Probably the most powerful since fire, right? It's just very powerful. And for me, I'm not a set anti-screen per se, but I'm passionately pro-connection.
Yes.
Right? Human connections, real connections. Now, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a study, and this is way back in 2011, and they found that kids, on average, are exposed to 7.5 hours of screens per day. The Common Sense Media group followed that up, and they replicated the study, and they find it's now 9.25 hours.
Holy cow.
I know, right? It's like, it's huge. And now, if anyone's listening to this and they're kids and they're thinking, man, do my kids really, just add it up slowly? Just add it up. It's big, particularly if they've got phones
or tablets or video games.
Tablets, video games, because they just draw you right in. You know that feeling when you played a video game and you come out of it and you think, I was just doing that for like 2 hours. Where that time, am I ever going to get that life back?
Right.
For me, it's all about connection, and it's a connection to not just random connections. It's a connection to 4 things that screens interfere because they take so much time. The first thing is the connection to nature. We all know that kids just thrive in a natural world, down the park, if you're in a city environment, out in the woods if you're in a rural environment, but connection to nature. It's, do you remember those times when you were kids and you were just out in nature? It's when you connect to something larger than yourself. The really important point is that many kids now are not connecting to things larger than themselves, so they become little tyrants.
Yes.
They expect their needs to be met at all times.
Now revolving.
Right. And we all want to raise our kids with a spirit of appreciation, not with a false sense of entitlement. Right. But if we wanted them if we want them to have a connection with something larger than themselves, there's just no better way than to give them time in nature.
Yeah.
Right? Because then they don't turn into these little kind of princes and princesses.
Right.
Because nature is full on into non-discrimination.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point, Mercedes. That's it, right? It's humbling. And you see the seasons change and you know that things are going on that you can't control.
Yeah.
Because kids these days are trying to control everything. You put a tablet in their hand and that makes you ruler of your universe.
Right.
Right? So time in nature really helps kids get an idea there's something bigger than themselves. And that might sound like a small point, but it's behaviorally, it's golden. It's really golden.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's the first connection that I really am keen for kids to do. But if they're on the screen for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, that's time they could be spending knowing there's something bigger than them. And what they're doing is actually doing the opposite. Because now I rule this world.
Yeah. Narrowing your focus, really.
Narrowing the focus. So the second one, it's like concentric circles. That's the biggest circle out. The next circle in, the second one is connection to friends and play. Do you remember being out playing with friends to all hours?
Yeah.
We'd
the best. Yeah.
Paint the ball and the bases with that probably toxic green paint, playing, into the night. Just that unstructured playtime with friends. That's the kind of right there is a connection to social and emotional intelligence, which is what our kids are going to need to succeed. We all know that. It's not about SAT scores.
Right.
It's about social and emotional intelligence.
Right.
It's not about being smart. It's when to use your smarts.
Yes.
And so that kind of impulse control, you see, that's what play gives us, because you can't just be impulsive because you fail. You get caught. If you're impulsively run for bait or run for that tree, which is base or whatever, you're going to get, so you learn impulse control. If we're spending 7.5 hours on screens a day or even 3 or 4, and we don't get to be with friends, we get to be, because friends are different to friending. They're different.
Yeah.
And that's where kids learn a lot of impulse control. And that's where kids start to have good sense of timing, which is crucial if they're going to succeed. So there's that's the second. And the third circle is connection to family. And that's obvious.
Yeah.
Connection to family values, not just family, but the values in our family. And in that way, kids can grow up with a, I think of it as a sense of true north, not the magnetic north of pop culture,
right?
But true north. So that when things come up with them as they grow up and then they're teenagers, and I've got a teenager, and I've got one kid who's just left for college, and they're sort of, you just got your fingers crossed, and you're thinking, man, I hope I those kids good values, not my values, really. Not, I don't want them to replicate me, but of course, but just growing them up in a value-centered home. Because we often hear we've got to have child-centered homes, and I'm not a big believer in that. It's just too much power to give a kid child-centered. And we've got to have value.
Yeah, it's not realistic.
So it's too much power to give little kids, and they don't feel safe if it's child-centered. I call them the shots. It's value-centered. And again, that takes time. If we walk into our home and kids, we've got a couple of kids, and all they're doing is staring at screens for hours, and we're there, and then we go look at a screen too.
Right.
That's not time for connection. I'll give you a quick example. My 2 kids that I mentioned, I'm only allowed to mention them 3 times a day. They put a quota on me. Okay, so this is the second. All right, I hope it'll be wise in the third. So we're down at I live near Boston, and we're down at the airport, and one of them who's been traveling a little bit lately, she's flying out at the same time as the younger one. The younger one doesn't know the lie of the land of the airport so much. She's done a little bit, but not now. She's on her own. She's away from us as parents. So the older one, the 19-year-old, is saying to the 17-year-old, "Look, don't worry about it. I'll take you through," because she was heading off to Australia actually, and my other daughter was heading off to Europe. And so she said, the older one says, "I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it." So they're going through security, and they have to take off their shoes. And the younger one looks back at me and just with this big grin, because they had to wrestle her to put on shoes in the first place. And and I know she's not going to put them back on. Anyway, she's going through security, and the older one is coaching how to do it. And then the older one says, I'll take you down to the gate. That's all organized. And I'll show you what to do. And don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And it's kind of nice. I'm thinking, okay, this is great. They're going to be fine. But as they turn the corner, they just turn the corner to walk, and they wave goodbye, I see that they're holding hands, right? And I'm thinking, I'm trying not to get teared up at all.
I'm tearing. They're not even my kids.
They will be. See, we can have that situation because that was based on
Connection.
Hours and hours of playing together. If they had been on tablets, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I was driving back in the car with my wife, and I'm doing the math, and I'm doing that 7.5 hour math thing. If they had 7.5 hours on the screen. Now, they didn't have screens growing up very much at all, very limited screen use. And even if they had have watched 4 hours a day, right, half, from the time they were 8 to 18, they would have actually seen 15,000 hours there, give or take, of screen. Yeah. Right? But they spent most of that 15,000 hours together.
Yeah.
Right? So when they turn the corner and they're holding hands, I'm thinking later, that's the result of endless time not separated and doing stuff on screens that was the time. That something there about time. Again. And look, the last one, this is the big answer to a question. Sorry, Mercedes, it's your fault because it was
and we've got a few more for you after this.
Yeah,
so
I better push on. But is this core thing right at the middle is not a connection to nature. It's not a connection to friends. It's not even a connection to family. Right at the core of it is a connection to yourself. Yeah, it's to your own values, so that when stuff happens and life gets rough,
tuning in instead of tuning out.
Exactly, and someone's treating you bad, and you're thinking, do I stay with this?
Right.
You know, how much, like these core decisions that kids will make, teenagers, drugs being offered. Do I go with this? Do I not? Those core decisions, that's all about self, connection to self. But screens deliver you messages that you've got to be like someone else.
Yeah.
It's particularly, I find this is particularly powerful for girls, is that you get all these images of you've got to look this way, be this way, say this way, move this. And that's what screens give a lot of. Now, I'm not agreeing a little bit of that. Okay. But it's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
For boys, it's all about being tough, being macho, being just, there's a whole imagery and can boys really get in touch with just true and strong feelings if they're continually told they shouldn't have them, right?
Right.
So there's this connection to themselves